Welcome to the national level workshop on Essentials of Python Programming, brought to you by Department of Information and Technology and Department of Computer Science Engineering at Tagore Engineering College. I would like to thank the management and principal for their support and encouragement in conducting this workshop. I'm sure this will bring forth knowledge on Python to a greater extent. The resource persons of the workshop are Dr. L. Jani Anbarasi, Senior Assistant Professor from VIT Chennai, as well Dr. Virgin Raja Sarobin, Senior Assistant Professor from VIT Chennai. Over to the session by Dr. Virgin Raja Sarobin.
Hello everybody, this is Professor Virgin from VIT University School of Computing Science and Engineering. First of all, I have to thank Tagore Engineering College Management for inviting myself and Dr. Jani Anbarasi for this national level 1 workshop on Python programming. Let us go with the topic. First thing is the installation with respect to Python. So this is available for free. You can download this software from www.python.org. So if you go with this website, the step-by-step process for the installation will be neatly explained. So you can follow the process, and if you don't have this Python in your system, you can download and then you can practice. Fine. First of all, before going with Python in depth, we'll see the difference between Python and C. You would have studied C language. Maybe in your curriculum, you would have studied your C language. Even if you have not studied, this won't be Python programming. Will not be very difficult. It will be easy for you to follow. And when you have studied C, you have to find the difference between Python and C before starting this Python programming. So the difference is C is a compiler-based language that you already know. But Python is an interpreter-based language. So, you know, basically what is this compiler and interpreter? So if it is a compiler-based language, the entire program will be, it will be compiled and you will be getting an output file. The output file actually, if it is a compiler-based language, first the compiler will be converting, it will be giving an object file that you may be knowing, right? .obj file. And that file will be again linked with the proper header files, and then you'll be getting the execution file, and from that execution file you'll be getting the output. Okay, and when you see the errors with respect to C program, the errors are displayed after entire program is checked. Okay, but it won't be the case for the Python program. Instead, Python program will be the interpreter based language. That is, instead of executing the entire program here in interpreter for Python, it takes instruction by instruction and then it will give the output. Okay. Another one important feature is, or important concept is, it will not generate a single file, or it will not generate obj file or execution file. Instead, for instruction by instruction, it will give the output. Errors are displayed for every instruction that is in Python program. Okay, so with this basic we can go with the topic. So when you see Python, as we have already discussed, this is an interpreter based language. There are two ways to use the interpreter. Okay, one is interactive mode, another one is script mode. So interactive mode, actually it is the very simple way to understand about each and every command, how it will be working. So if you're a beginner, you can start with the interactive mode. But the thing is, you'll be able to execute only one line of code or only a very simple piece of code in interactive mode. Okay. When you want to make some application, or when you want to do some more number of lines of code of program, then you have to go with script mode. So initially you can start learning with interactive mode. Then you can move towards script mode. So Python interactive mode, actually, you'll be having this kind of prompt. Okay, when you start your Python, after installation, when you start your Python, you'll be getting a prompt like this. That is Python command line shell. Inside this Python command line shell only, you will be doing the code. okay? But the thing is, you'll be able to do only few pieces of code in this, or line by line. Each line you'll be able to do in this prompt, and you'll be able to execute it, okay? So if you want to do some arithmetic operations with respect to any integer values or floating point values, or between any variables also, you'll be able to do it in this command line shell, fine? So when you get this particular prompt, it means like your interpreter is ready to accept the code, and it will be ready to give the output also. So when you get this prompt, you'll be able to enter the code. Okay, this is with respect to interactive mode. And we'll be seeing like how you have to give some code. We are going to see the hands-on, or I'll be giving the demo with respect to interactive mode. So don't worry about that. So this is your Python command line shell. So this is the interactive mode actually. So when you open your Python shell, you'll be getting something like this. So your screen will look like this. See here, this will be, the first line shows what is the version of the Python, and which year it got released. Everything you'll be getting from this, or what is the processor size it will be accepting. So everything you'll be getting in the first line. So I have this is 3.1.3 version, but if you install, you may be getting some latest version. So you don't worry about that. The thing is, first it should be 3. Other higher version, you don't want to worry. Even if it is 3.3 or 3.4, you don't want to worry about that. Okay. But remember, don't use right now Python 2 version. Okay, Python 2 version is somewhat different with respect to Python 3. So better go with Python 3. So once you get this prompt, once you get this command line shell activator, then there you can give the piece of code, and when you press enter, you will get the output. Okay, this is the way you will be doing. We'll be seeing the demonstration also. The next one will be the script mode. We'll be doing so many programs in the interactive mode after a few minutes. So this is script mode. Here, why we want to use the script mode is if you have more number of lines of code, then you can go with the script mode. There you can type the program in the editor, you can save it, and whenever you need that, you can open the file and you can even edit it also. In the future also you can use it. So you'll be going with the script mode, and you will be doing the program if there are so many lines of code. So I'll show you a few things with the interactive mode also. For script mode, what you have to do is, from this Python shell, you have to go to this file menu and you have to open a new file. When you open a new file, editor will be open, and there you will be writing the code, any number of lines of code, and you have to save that code using .py extension. So I'm going to open already existing file with .py. So with every file should have this .py extension if it is in the script mode. So here I have given few very simple examples of print function. So see here I have print, within this print function I have given simple addition, simple arithmetic operations I have given, and I have given some comparisons also. So when I say 4 plus 3, definitely you know like 7 should be printed in the output screen, and 4 minus 3 the result will be printed. And when you do the comparison, either a false or a true Boolean value will be printed there. When you say hello world within this double quotes, it means like whatever you are writing within double quotes will be string. See, in the script mode, after doing this programming, you have to save it. So you have to save your file, and you have to run the file by using this run module, or you can press F5 for this also. And you can see the results in the shell, the Python shell. In the Python shell, you can see the results. This is how you will be working with the script mode. Okay, clear? I believe like you have understood how you have to work both with interactive mode and script mode. Normally interactive mode means 1 or 2 lines of code you can try with the interactive mode, and if there are a bunch of lines of code, then definitely you have to move with the script mode. type your code there, save it using .py extension. Then you can run the code and you'll be able to see the output in Python shell. Back to the presentation, I'll be discussing right from the Python basics. So what is this identifier and keyword in Python? So this identifier is a sequence of one or few characters mainly used to name a given program element. It is similar to a variable name. What you have seen in C language and other programming language, it is like a variable name. How you have to give the variable name, what are the restrictions, what are the rules? Mostly it will be similar to other programming language. So your this identifier should start with the letters, and it can have letters and digits, but it should not begin with a digit. This is the main restriction here also. And you can have underscore character is permitted here. And this keyword, when you see this keyword and identifier, keyword is already an inbuilt one, predefined one. So it will be already having some meaning. So while giving a name for a program element, never use this keyword as an identifier. So that should be taken care by the programmer. They have to be very, very careful in that. So keyword cannot be used as regular identifiers. You can see a few of the keywords in Python. So these are the existing keywords in Python. So you should not use this keyword as identifier in Python. Fine. So we'll see the respective program with respect to identifier and keyword, and we'll move towards the programming, the script side. So this is a very simple code. What I have done is I have taken two values, 3 and 5, and I have assigned that to two identifiers. One is element 1 and element 2. So see how I have used this naming. I have started with alphabet, and I have used underscore also. I have used digit also. So this is how you can, whatever you're convenient with based on the requirement, you can name this particular variable. And the identifier you can use properly based on the given rules of Python programming. And what I have done is I have added these two elements, element 1 and element 2, and I have stored the value, the resultant value, in another one variable result. This is another one identifier. So 3 identifiers I have used in this program, very simple program I have used, and I'm going to print this result using print function. So if I want to print my result, I have to use like this, print, within bracket I have to use the variable. So when I run the code, how I'll be running the code, I have to go to this run menu and I have to press this run module, or I can use F5. Before running the code, actually I should save the code, or otherwise this side interpreter will take care about saving the code. You have to say OK, and in the Python shell, you'll be able to see the result. This is how you'll be running the code from this script mode. The next very important thing in Python programming is how to use these commands. Mainly this will be usable for the documentation purpose. So two ways you can use these commands. It could be a single line command or it could be multi-line command. For single line command, you have to use this hash symbol, and for multi-line command, you have to use this triple double quotes. So this is not the exact way actually. I'll be showing some examples for this commands. So before that, before going with the example, let me go with the data type. Then with the data type, I have included the comments also, the possible option of single line as well as double line command, the multi-line comments. And I'll be explaining that part in the code later after this data type explanation. So data types, mainly this will be very easy type of database, data types which are there in this Python programming. The very often used data types will be Boolean values. The numeric data types like integer, float, And for some scientific calculations, people will be using complex data type also. String data type, list, tuple, set, dictionary. These are the very basic data types normally people will be using in Python programming, and even in the application of Python programming like machine learning, natural language processing, etc. Before going with the operators, we'll see the example with respect to the data types. So I have included the code with the same example, whatever we have executed previously. What I have done, see, the previous code that what I have executed, that I have commented, that I have included in multi-line comment. So this particular part of the code will be commented right now. So this will not be executed by the interpreter. So if the interpreter sees this multi-line comment, so this part will not be executed. Even the single line comments like this also, this will not be executed, and this will not be considered by the interpreter at all. So these are few examples of the data types that whatever we have seen in the PPT. So this is how you don't want to explicitly, you don't want to tell about the data type. So for example, if you say x equal to 20, so the interpreter itself will understand like this 20 is an integer data type, and x will be considered as the keyword, sorry, the identifier for this integer data type. So when you say print x, the expected value will be 20, yes. And again, I am going to initialize this x value. So this x value, now I am going to initialize that with 20.5. So this 20.5 will be assigned to x, and this is a float. Okay. So when I print x, I'll be getting the float as the answer. Similarly for string, very carefully, it should be within double quotes or single quote. So whatever you are writing within double quotes or single quote, that will be considered as a string. And I'm going to store that in one variable or the identifier. So when I print that variable or the identifier, I'll be getting this hello world, whatever string I have already assigned. And this is for list. Be very careful, like when you give a list, when you initialize a list to a variable or identifier, you have to use this square bracket. So these are the items in the list. You can have the integer items inside the list or floating point value inside the list, or you can have even string also inside the list. When you want to have integer values inside the list, you can say like 1, 2, 3 or something. When you want to have floating point 1.2, 2.3, 3.4, in that way you can assign the value as a list to this variable. So when you print this x, all the elements within the list will be printed when you say x. And this is tuple. This is the difference between, this is how you have to initialize your list and the tuple. Tuple, it should be simple bracket, and all the elements in the tuple should be within double quotes if it is a string. And integer or floating point, it should be as per the things whatever I have to explain in list. And for dictionary, you have to use this curly bracket. So curly bracket, you have to say a name for this a name for this element value. So name is what to say, like it is the this is the piece of element that will be holding the name is John. And when you say age, it will be considered like John's age is 36. This value will be assigned to this age, and John value will be assigned to this name. So this whole thing will be assigned to this variable or the identifier x, and you can print that also. And in the set, again, you won't be having this colon and assigning the value to the variable, to the name. Instead, you will be having only the elements. So that will be also within curly bracket. And when you print this set, you will be able to get all the elements of the set. And even you can have the Boolean values also to the identifier. So when you say true to and when you try to assign the value to x, when you print x, you will be getting the value as true. Even you can try that for false also. So what I'm going to do is, I have commented this part, this initial part, only this particular piece of code. This code snippet alone I'm going to run now, because all the other rest of the codes I have already commented. These are the codes we'll be seeing later by seeing all the concepts, each and every concept. Whenever we are going through the PPT, I'll be showing the particular code snippet also. Right now for data type, I'm trying to run the code. When I run the code in the Python shell, I'll be getting the respective values. Okay. So for all the data types, whatever we have assigned, that respective values, we got it in the Python shell. Okay. I hope you have understood the different data types and how you have to use those data types also in Python. Operators in Python, there are different operators in Python, like arithmetic operators, comparison operators, logical operators, and so on. So we'll be seeing the very basic operators that we'll be using normally in most of your computation side. So these are the arithmetic operators. Addition, you know very well. Subtraction, there won't be a problem at all. And multiplication, there won't be a problem at all. Division, when you use this slash symbol, when you go with a single slash, you'll be getting the answer in floating point value. If you want an integer division, you have to use this double slash. Okay, so this you have to be very careful. And modulo, or to get a reminder, you have to use this percentage. Exponent, you have to use double star. So these are the basic arithmetic operators you will be using. And order of operations also very, very important. So parenthesis, it will be taking a high priority. The order will be higher. So whatever you have within the parenthesis, that will be executed by the interpreter, followed by the exponent. Double star means exponent, then multiplication, this division, integer division, remainder, all will be taking the same order. Then the addition and subtraction. So these are the order of operations. So you'll be having the different comparison operators also, like not equal, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. These are different operators, Python comparison operators you have. So here I have given with the different identifiers also how this comparison operators will be used. And there are so many, few logical operators also, like and, or, not. You know the literal meaning of this logical operators. So whatever the logic you have in this logical operators, in the same way this Python will also be, the interpreter will also be taken care about this logical operators. And bitwise operators, like a bitwise and bitwise or bitwise XOR, bitwise NOT, left shift, right shift, all these things will be possible in Python also. So these are the different operators you have. And it's easy. What you can do is, you can go to the interactive mode and you can take one or two identifiers and you can use this, you can try this logical operators, you can try this arithmetic operators, and so on and so. I can show how you have to work with this interactive mode for this case. See, I'm in the interactive mode. What I have done is 3 multiplied with 4 and I got the result. In this way you can try with the different different arithmetic and logical operators. When I say 9 single slash with 2, I'll be getting 4.5. This is what I have said, like what is the difference between normal division and integer division. So when I say double slash, you'll be getting the integer value. So you can try with modulo also, and you can try with even exponent and all those things. For all the operators, I have given the choice to you. You can try with the different arithmetic logical operators by writing the piece of code in the interactive mode, single line of code in the interactive mode itself. This topic is a very interesting and very important topic in Python programming. That is algorithmic approach. So you have 3 different approaches here: sequential approach, selection approach, and iteration approach. Sequential is very simple. It is the step-by-step process in which you will be trying to execute the code. So you won't be having any branching, you won't be having any looping. Instead, the computation will be a step-by-step process. So that way of doing the programming is sequential. There is no parallel programming. That concepts and all won't be coming here in the sequential. Okay. The next one is selection. It is mainly for the decision-making process. It is basically the conditional branching case. Okay, we'll be seeing that in detail. Iteration is looping. If you want a piece of code to run for multiple number of lines, then you will be writing that particular part of the code within some loop or within some iteration, and you'll be running that to how many iterations you want. To that you'll be writing the code, and you'll be running the code several times. So these are the three algorithmic approach. We'll see this one by one. Sequential is the first one. It is a very simple way of writing the code. See, I am going to explain this with the help of a simple algorithm to find the area of a circle. So what you will be doing for the area of a circle, you know the formula pi r square, right? So you will be seeing like what are the input you want to get it from the user. So radius is the input. You will be getting that from the user, or you will be assigning the value. It's depending on the programmer. And once the input radius is ready, that the square of the radius has to be computed. Then it has to be multiplied with the pi value, that is 3.14. So once the multiplication or that computation is over, the output will be stored in the result. So you can have some identifier for that result. Identifier is nothing but variable name. So here that variable name is area. So you will be storing the result in area, and you have to print that result. This is a simple thing you want to do in this program. So here you can see like there is no looping, there is no branching and so on. So it is only step-by-step process. After completing this step 1, you have to go with step 2, then step 3, step 4, step 5. You don't want to go with a looping and all. So this kind of thing will be a sequential pattern of programming. This is a very fundamental algorithmic approach. So we'll see this code, related code. See, I have taken radius as 5. You can get it from the user, or you can assign the value. Here I have assigned the value. So I'll be teaching how to get the input from the user also using input function. And you remember for the output, you will be having print function. And for the input, you will be having input function that will be using it later. So here only I have assigned the value as 5 to radius. Pi value also I have assigned 3.14, and area, the computation part I have written here, the formula I have written here. So I'm going to store my result in the variable area, the identifier area, and I'm going to print my result. So whatever I am writing within double quotes, it will be printed as such. Okay. So after that, I'm going to give my proper. This comma is very, very important. So within this print function, so for earlier what we have done is we have printed only the variable or only the value we have printed. Now only we are printing this with the proper output viewable format, like what is the thing you are trying to print. That should be written within double quotes followed by the variable or the identifier. So area you are trying to print. See the rest of the codes. The code, whatever we have run previously, that I have commented within this 3 double quotes. See here, and the end also I have this 3 double quotes. So everything will be commented within multi-line comments. So this part will not be executed. Here also, the bottom part also, everything I have commented. We'll be seeing that codes further. Right now, we have only this part as the code to be executed, and I have a single line comment also. This part also will not be executed by the interpreter. So when I run the code, I'll be getting the area of the circle value is 78.5, whatever computation is happening. So that will be completed and I'll be getting the result. The next thing is we'll be seeing selection part in Python programming. So in the selection pattern, normally this will be for decision making process. So you'll be having the condition check here. So when I say about condition check, you could remember like if else, if else nested and those kind of things, whatever you have studied in C language and other languages, you'll be able to relate it here also. So here also we'll be having if statement, if else statement, and so and so. So this is the decision making process. Here you will be checking the condition. The condition is satisfied, you will be doing some statements here and you will be ending the process. If it is false, you will be skipping this particular statements and you will be going with other statements, or you will be ending the process. So this is a simple way you can understand how the decision making process will be happening within the selection pattern in Python programming. So see here, this is a syntax you have to use this if statement. So if followed by a condition, this colon is very, very important here. When you press enter in the script mode, when you type if condition, then followed by a colon, and when you press enter, with proper indentation, it will be permitting you to type the rest of the statements or rest of the code. And after that, you have to use this else in the same indentation of this if condition. And when you have this colon, this is very mandatory. This colon is also very mandatory. When you have this colon and when you press enter with proper indentation, you will be having the further statements. So this is one example I have given here. See if grade greater than or equal to 70. This is the keyword. If is the keyword. I hope you can relate keyword as well as the identifier, right? Keyword is the built-in one, already defined one. So the keyword if followed by the condition, and after that you have to use this colon. With proper enter, you will be getting this indentation and you will be printing the statements here, or you will be typing the statements here, and then you will be putting else statement also, and the colon. When you press enter, you will be getting these statements. So this is a simple example and the syntax for a statement. Indentation is very, very important in Python. So when you miss this indentation, you won't be getting the proper output. Say for example, if you have if here and else not here, and if it is or, very simply, if you want to understand, like when I say when you have if condition check colon without indentation, if I put print statement here itself, I won't be getting the result. It will be saying like the syntax error, or it will be throwing some error. So indentation is very, very important in Python. See, this is a very simple algorithm I have given for selection pattern, and we are going to convert this algorithm into code. See, step one, simply I'm going to start the process. I'm going to get 3 inputs like physics, chemistry, and math. I'm going to find the total value for all the subjects, whatever I have got from the user or whatever I have assigned. Then I'm going to get the average. The step 5, I'm going to have the condition check or decision making process. I'm going to have it in step 5. What I'm going to do is, if average score is greater than or equal to 98, then that particular candidate will be getting the medical seat. Otherwise, he'll be getting engineering seat. So this is the simple condition I have given. This is the decision making process. So here only I'll be selecting what process I have to do, and if it violates this particular condition, what process I have to do. So this algorithm, this is a simple, why I have taken this simple algorithm is you can very well understand this one. So this simple algorithm we are going to see in the code. See, I'm not going to get the input from the user. I'm not using the input function so far. Only I'm going to assign the value for you to be very, you can understand this very easily. Later we will see how you have to get the input from the user. So I'm going to assign the values, 3 values. I'm going to do the computation like total mark, then average I have computed. Remember, when you have single slash, it will be taking only the floating as the answer. So average will be having the floating value. That's okay. So what I have done is, this is the condition check. If average greater than or equal to 98, see here, when I have this colon and when I press enter with proper indentation, I'll be getting my cursor. So there I'll be writing my print statement, sorry. So next, the else part with colon, I'll be getting the proper indentation and I'll be putting the other statements. Okay. So this is how I'll be writing the code with selection pattern. So now I am going to run this particular part alone. Rest of the things I have already commented. So you don't want to worry. This particular part I am going to run the code. So I didn't save the average. So you can check very well, like all the marks are see 97, 98, 99, and I'm going to compare this with 98 only. So definitely my average value will be greater than 98 only. So this person, this candidate will be getting the medical education or medical seat. So this is what I have printed. So this is how you will be using if statement and else statement. Coming back to the PPT, you can go with nested if statements also. So see, this is how you have to use this nested if statement, and examples also I have given. If a condition exists, then colon the particular statements else. Within else, you can go with another if else statement also. Within this else, you can go with another if else statement also, and so and so. Okay. So this is multi-way of selection process. You can use as many number of if else statements within a major or within a parent if else statement, and you can go with the process. So this logic is similar to other programming language. Only thing is how you have to use this if statement, else statement, and proper indentation. You don't want to use any curly brackets and so. Only indentation will take care about that. You don't want to use curly bracket, that you have to keep in mind. Indentation will take care about. So if you have proper indentation, the interpreter will do the execution properly and it will be getting the expected results. So this is nested if statement. I have given the example also. So what you can do is, you can execute this example and you can see how you are getting the results. Else if ladder is also possible. This is also for multi-way selection. See, if a particular condition exists, then you are going to do this statement. And normally what you will be doing without this elif, if condition exists, then this statement. Else, within else, you will be writing another if condition exists, a particular statement. Else, if condition exists, and so and so. Like whatever you are, it's written here. See, if condition exists, this statement. Else, if, then this statement. Else, if. So you can club this else and if part, and you can write it as elif. So if a condition exists, this will be executed. Else, if condition exists, this will be executed. And this will be going on till you get the last else part. Okay. So else if ladder, you can use that with elif keyword also. Okay. So these are the things you will be having the selection pattern. So selection pattern, only one example I have given in the Python programming side, in the code side, in the script side. Rest of the thing I have given in the PPT itself. You can execute this particular part of the code within the PPT itself. Fine. Iterative patterns in Python. There are basically two loop commands, while loop and for loop. Depending on the requirement, you can either go with while loop or you can go with for loop. I'll be explaining both the syntax and how you have to use this while loop and how you have to use this for loop. So when you, as we already discussed, when you want to execute a particular set of statements or particular set of code for several times, you will be writing that particular part within the loop. Okay. So first we'll see about while loop. So this is the format, or this is how the flow will be going with while loop in Python. So you'll be having the while, the keyword and followed by the condition check. So if that condition check is true, then this particular statements will be executed. Till this condition is satisfied, this particular statements will be executed. So this will be executed several times, okay, more than one time. And if it fails, then it will be coming to this part. If there is any statement, this will be executed or it will be ending the process. So this is the simple flow of while loop in Python. I have given the syntax of while loop. See, while is the keyword we have used, and we have to have the test or the condition check here. So if the condition is satisfied, the statements will be executed and again by this while loop. Else this part will be executed and you are going to run the process, stop the process. See, this else part is optional. You can have the else part, or even if there is no else part also, there won't be any error. This particular part will be executed till the condition, whatever it's returned within while, will be satisfied, and then it will be coming with the end of the, it will come to the end of the execution. Okay. So this is a syntax in while. Before going with for loop, we'll see few examples with while loop in the script mode. See here, yes, here I have used the input function to get the input from the user. So this is how you have to use the input function. Okay, so input of, and whatever you are writing within single quotes or double quotes, that will be only printed in the screen. That will not impact more for the execution, program execution. So whatever you are writing within the input function, that will be just entered in the screen. So you are getting the value from the user. And why I have used this int is, this is typecasting. For typecasting, I have used this int. So what happens is, see, we'll go with the interactive mode and we'll see how this input function will work. See, I'm saying input of, you're able to view this. What I have done is, I am saying as input of, enter the value from the, get the value from the user. I'm saying like get the value from the user within double quotes, and I'm going to close the function. And when I press enter, say, if I say it is asking like the user has to give the input, I'm saying 5. Okay. When I give 5, now you can view, I think. See, I have executed this particular line of code in the interactive mode. So it is asking me like get the, you give the input. So I have given, I have fed 5, and that 5 is within single quote. Meaning is whatever input we get from the user using input function will be in string format. Okay, this is very, very important. So if you want to have that input in integer format, what you have to do? You have to typecast it. So I have used int as typecasting the string input into integer value. If you want that input to be a float value, you have to say float. Okay. So the proper typecasting you have to give here, because the input function will accept only string as the input from the user. Okay, this you have to be very, very careful. If you don't use int and if you do some string manipulations within this, that will not be properly handled by the interpreter. So this you have to be very careful. So I have typecasted the input and I have stored the input in P. Now what I'm going to do, I'm using this while loop. In while loop, the condition check is if whether my P value is greater than 5. If my P value is greater than 5, what I'm doing? I'm going to print my, print something. What I have printed, a single character I have printed as P. For very simplicity, I have used this one. For you to understand the simple way, I have printed only P. And I'm going to reduce this P value. I'm going to do a subtraction with 1, and I'm going to assign this P value as 4. The next iteration, my P value will be 4, and I'm again, say for example, if I get a P value as 6 or something, so 6, whether it is greater than 5, yes. Now 6 will be decremented as 1, so 6 will be decremented as 5 now, and again I will be going with the while loop. and I'll be checking whether 5 is greater than 5. No, it will come out of the loop. And what is written in the else part? Print Q. So when I give P as 6, a single time I'll be getting P, and then I'll be getting Q. And similarly, when I give some other higher values, depending on that values, I'll be getting that many number of P and Q values. Okay, Q. If I give P as 4, then this part will not be executed even once. It will come to the else part and only Q will be printed. Okay. So this is a very simple way to explain the syntax of the while loop using a simple example. Let us run this code. I have commented all the other part. So when you run the code, it is asking me to give the input value. See, when I give 3, it is printing only Q. Okay. But again, I'm going to run the code. When I give some higher values, say for example 8 or something, that many number of times I'll be getting P. How many times the while loop will be working with the true condition, that many number of times I'll be getting P, and else part only one time I'll be getting Q. So this is a very simple way. So you can also try this code. Next, using while loop, again I have tried this factorial program. So what I'll do is I'll be commenting this previous program. So this is commented, and I'm going to enable only factorial program now. So see here, all the other part will be in green. Only this part is highlighted with proper color, interpreter color. So only this part is enabled now. So this is a factorial program using while loop. I have initialized x value as 4. So initialization is also possible, or you can get the input from the user using input function. And if you get the integer value, normally factorial, you will be getting integer value only. So if you get the integer value, you have to typecast it using ing. Okay, don't forget that one. So you can get the input in x. So fact, as a simple way, what I have done is I have initialized fact as 1. And I'm going to check whether x is greater than or equal to 1. If so, then fact will be multiplied repeatedly with x value. And I'll be saving my factorial value with a proper appropriate computed value within each iteration. And I'm going to decrement my x value with 1. So this will be taken care till I reach my x value as 1. Okay. So after that, repeatedly, this fact will be computed as 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. Till that much it will be computed, and I'll be getting the answer in fact, and I'm going to print my resultant value as fact. Okay, see, whatever I have within while loop, I have written with proper indentation. With proper indentation, I have written. Okay, so colon with proper indentation I have written. And see how I have written the print statement. Print statement, I didn't do any indentation. It means like it has come out from the while loop. So whatever answer I have in fact, that will be printed only once. Okay. Instead, if I say something like this, with indentation, if I would have written print of fact, then for each iteration, I will be getting the fact value, whatever it's computed within that iteration. Okay. That's not needed actually. Only resultant value is enough. So you can come out of this while loop and you can print the answer after this while loop. Okay. Let's see if we can run this code. I think you don't have any doubts in this. We don't have else part, that you have to be very careful. If you want to have else part, what you can do? You can write else colon and with proper indentation, you can write the statements here and you can have the else part. But for this particular problem, we don't want to have the else part, so it is not mandatory. So I have only the while part, and then the result value is printed. I didn't save my code, so it will be asking me to save the code. Yes, I have saved. I'm going to, so this is my factorial value for 4. Okay. Since I have given x equal to 4, I have got the factorial value is 4. Otherwise, you can give 5. Or you can get the input from the user using input function, and you can try all these things. Okay. Next, we'll go with the for loop. Before that, before going that, what I'll do is I'll be commenting this one and I'll be opening this for us to get ready for the next program for loop. Okay, I'll make it ready. We'll go with the PPT, then I'll be coming to explain this piece of code. Okay. Okay. So for loop. So for loop, you'll be having what is syntax is you'll be having the keyword for. Then I will be having an iterating variable. That iterating variable you'll be checking whether it is within the sequence. So sequence is nothing but you will be having a range function here most of the time. For the beginners, you can study with the range function. Later, you can try with the list, set, and so and so. Right now, I'm not going to explain that with the list data structure. We are going to see only with range function, the sequence part. Okay. So you are going to check whether your variable is within this range function. If so, then this particular statements will be executed. Otherwise, it will come out of the loop. Okay. This is for loop. So here the condition check will be happening whether this is within the range. If so, this particular statements will be executed till this iterating variable is within the range of the sequence. Okay. If it is not within the range, then it will come out of the loop. So this is for loop. This will be very new, I think, for you. We can see the example, and I will be explaining with the example. See, the syntax is for iteration variable in range. Then this particular colon is very, very important. For selection pattern and iteration pattern, colon is very, very important. Selection pattern means you could remember like if statement, if else statement, and so on. So there everywhere that colon at the end of the statement is very, very important. Even in while loop also, for loop also, this colon is very, very important. Then only you will be getting the proper indentation. So these statements will be executed. Example I have given here. See, for n is this variable, this iteration variable, n in range of 5. It means like when you say range of 5, it will be checking like whether n is within 0 to 4. Okay. So whether n is within 0 to 4, it will take the value from 0 to 4, and that value till it goes to 4, or each time it will be incremented until it reaches 4, that value will be printed. This is what I have written, print n. So till this range of 5, this n value will be printed one by one. So when you say range of 5, default, this n value will be starting from 0. So during the first iteration, this n value will be assigned as 0 from this range of 5, and 0 will be printed. Then automatically it will be incremented as 1, and 1 will be printed. Then 2 will be printed till it reaches 4. Those value will be printed one by one. Okay. So instead of giving a single parameter here, you can go with double parameter, and you can go with triple parameters also. It means like what is the initial value, what is the final value that has to be printed, that you can give within comma, and how much count it has to increase, or in whether this range has to increase, or whether this range has to decrease. That also you can give with the as a third parameter here. So third argument you can give. The third argument could be positive value, or it could be negative value. So if I say a range of 1, 5, 1, or 1, 5, 2, if I say like this, then n will take the value as 1, and the count, the third parameter I have given as 2. So 2 will be skipped and it will be printing 3. Then 4 will be skipped. Since the range is still 5, it will not be printed. So this is how I'll be getting the values from this for loop. Okay. I hope you could understand this one. We'll see example with the Python code. See, I have written the code using for loop. So this is the variable n, and I'm going to check whether n is in range of 5. I'm going to print this n as the statement within this for loop. So I'll be executing this part of the code. So when I say range of 5, the function gives the value only from 0 to 4. This you have to be very careful, okay? Still 5, if you want to get the result, you have to give range of 6. So only if you say range of n, 0 to n minus 1 only will be affected if you give this range function. So I'm going to execute this particular part of the code. See, I got the value as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is how it is done using this for loop. I have given another one example using for loop, sum of n natural numbers. So I'll just explain the code. Later you can try this. I'm going to comment this particular part, what I have done so far. So this is, see how I am commenting. So only this part is highlighted. So this is the code which will be ready for execution right now. So this is using for loop. I am going to find sum of n natural numbers. I'm going to get the input from the user, whatever sum of n you have to find, that n value you have to get it from the user. I'm using input function, and I'm using for loop with using this range function. And each time I'm going to find the summation value. So resultant value, I'll be storing that in sum. So initially I have initialized my sum value as 0. So as long as I get this range of n, 1 to n, this value, the summation value will be updated. And finally I'll be finding, I'll be giving the output. I'll be trying to print the output as sum. I'll just run the code. See, so the code, it is saying like for I in range of 1 to n. Okay. So if I want to print sum of some 10 natural numbers, then remember I have to give the n value as 11. Then only it will be, this range function will be considering from 1 to 10. Okay, within the loop. So I'm going to give the input value as 11. So the output I will be getting as 55. It is sum of 10 natural numbers. Right from 1, I'm getting this as output. Okay, this is how I'll be dealing with for loop. So iteration part is done. We'll move towards the summation, the function part. Before that, I'll be commenting the rest of the code. So we are now in the function side. So function in Python. We'll move to the PPT. So functions. So mainly this will be increasing the program modularity. So if you want to reduce a particular code duplication, normally you'll be writing that particular part of the code within a function, and how many times you want to execute that particular part, you can call the function. So mainly you'll be having either a built-in function, or you can write your own function also. So when you write your own function, normally you'll be calling that as user-defined function. And Python itself has so many built-in functions. So you remember some built-in function we have already gone through. Example, print function, input function, range function, and so on. So those are all built-in function. But we are going to see user-defined function right now. How the user is going to define the function and how the user is going to call the function. These are things we are going to see now. So these are the different possibilities you will have in Python. So function prototypes will be categorized into 4. Like you can write the function without argument and without return type. Similar to the other programming languages only. You can write the function without argument and with return type, with argument and without return type, with argument and with return type. So this is the way you can write the function. Examples for each, we will be seeing one example. See, without argument and without return type, So here only you are calling the function. I'm having the function as add. This is a user-defined function. So definitely I'm calling the function here and I have to define the function. Remember, always you have to define the function before calling the function itself. That is very important in Python. So you are calling the function here and you are defining the function. So that will be, so definitely this keyword is important. You have to say def. It means like you are trying to define a function and the same function name, whatever you have used in the function call, you have to use here. And you are telling to this is not needed actually. You can simply say as add of, and within colon, you can, this colon it's mandatory, and with proper indentation, you can say like a print statement to enter the value of A and B. So only this will be given in the Python shell. So this will be shown to the user in the Python shell, enter the value of A and B. Using input function, you are going to get 2 input. You are trying to find the summation of this 2 input, and you are going to have the answer in sum. Sorry, there is some mistakes. So you are having the answer in sum. So in print, within double quotes, whatever you want to fancify your output, you can give here, comma. Is it is not right? Actually, it should be sum. Okay, print sum. So when you say sum, your output will be printed within the function definition. Okay, you are not doing any return statement here. You are not having any return. You are not having any arguments also. Okay, this is function without arguments and without return type. There is no return statement and you are not passing any argument. Just you are getting the input from the user. This is also not needed. A comma B is not needed. Simply you can say and add off. Okay, you are going to get the input from the user. You are going to do the computation part here, and you are going to print your output also here. Okay, you are not going to return. The second one is without argument and with return type. So see, the return type is there, but there is no argument. This is the place where you are going to call the function. So you are calling the function, and whatever this function definition is going to return, that you are going to get it from the Z, going to get it into Z variable. Okay. So you are going to call the function, and you are moving to function definition part. You are going to get the input from the user. Same example I have shown here also. You are going to find the sum, and you are going to return the sum. It means like when you say return sum, this will be returned back to the function call, and it will be assigned to the variable Z. This is proper. This particular code is proper, but previous code there were few mistakes. When I try to share, when I share the PPT to you people, I'll modify that and I'll share it to you. Okay. This is proper. There is no argument here. Also there is no argument, but you have the return statement. So whatever you are returning, that will be captured here within this variable, and you are going to print this variable. Okay, so you are going to print that not within the function definition. You are returning it, and you are going to print it after function call. Okay, this is function without argument and with return type. This is with argument and without return type. So this is the place where you are going to call the function. So it should have the arguments. So if you want to have the argument, definitely you have to get the input from the user. So you are going to get the input from the user A and B. This is not within function definition. This part is not within function definition. You can see the indentation difference also. Okay, you are getting the input from the user. That input variable you are going to have in the argument side of the function call. And once the function definition is mapped, see, this A and B will be mapped with this function definition A and B, and the computation will be happening here, and you are trying to print your result. This is not Z, actually it is sum. Okay, print sum here. This sum should come here. Okay, otherwise you have to replace this with Z. So you are trying to print your resultant value within function definition. Okay, you are not returning anything. This is with argument and without return type. And this is with argument and with return type. You are getting the input from the user, calling the function, and when you see after function call, when it is assigned to the variable, definitely there will be some return function, okay? Return statement. So you are calling the function and this is assigned to one variable. So definitely the return value will be assigned to this variable. And moving to the function definition, this A and B will be mapped with this A and B argument in the function definition part. You are finding the summation, you are returning the answer, okay? Returning the resultant value. This will be mapped here in Z. Okay, so listen very carefully. This return, this sum will be mapped to this Z. Okay, and you are printing this Z. Fine. These are 4 ways you can deal with function, and I have given a few codes also for this function within this .py file. What I'll be doing is I'll be sharing this Python all-in-one file, .py file to you, as well as the PPT. These are the basics you have to learn before dwelling inside the advanced topics of Python. So today we have discussed about the basic things like identifier, keywords, the different operators, then mainly the algorithmic approach like sequential part, the selection pattern, iteration pattern. These are very, very important. And the function, how to deal with function. The different 4 ways to deal with argument as well as return type. Okay. So once this part is very clear for you, then slowly you can move towards the different data structures like list, set, tuple, dictionary, and so and so. So one suggestion, we are running out of time actually, so I'll be closing with this. So my suggestion is, first, once you're thorough with these topics, what you can try is, you can try learning about list, then you can move towards tuple, then set, and finally the dictionary. So once that part is done, then most of the basic ideas of Python will be very clear for you. Then you can go with the application of Python, like how it will be applied for machine learning, how it will be applied for natural language processing, and you can try the different learning techniques of AI using this Python. So I believe like you would have got some idea about Python programming right now. So with this, don't stop learning Python. So this is only the first part, or phase 1 of learning Python. The rest of the phases, if you have the good what to say, like if you practice more with this part, then definitely the rest of the part will be piece of cake for you. Okay, so do well, apply Python in your research part, in your project parts, and so and so. So that's it from my side. I'm signing off. Okay, thank you.
Good morning. This is Jani Andarsi, Assistant Professor from Vellore Institute of Technology, Chennai. And we'll see about data visualization. Data visualization helps us to understand the data by placing it in a visual context so that the patterns, trends, and the correlations that might not otherwise be detected can be exposed. Python offers multiple great graphing libraries, different features, create interactive and live or highly customized plots. It helps us to create a lot of customized plots, and Matplotlib is the best library that is allowing us to do so. And Matplotlib is specifically good for creating basic graphs like line charts, bar charts, histograms, and many more. And if you wanted to do all these, you have to import the library. So you can use this function, import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. You can give any variable in the place of this PLT. I have specified it as PLT. First, we'll see about this histogram plot. So histogram are a type of bar plot for numeric data that groups the data into bins. The underlying frequency distribution of a set of continuous data can be analyzed using this histogram plot. So whenever you wanted to plot, you should have some data. So instead of taking some numbers, I have taken a random integer values between random integer values and I've stored it in a variable called data1. And I've used PLT followed by dot hist followed by the data. So hist is the one is going to give you the histogram plot for the stored data for the values that are stored in data. And you can see this is the histogram plot that has been defined. And I'll show you one more histogram plot where I've created a random numbers and I've stored it in a variable called data2, and I've specified plot dot hist data2 comma color is equal to blue. So you can specify the color also. So one important thing you should remember here is the number of bins. By default it is taking it as 10. If you wanted to change the number of bins, you can do that also. So here I have shown you a histogram plot for an individual data. So if you have more number of data and if you wanted to plot all of those data into a single graph, what will you do? You can have all these together. See, for example, I have shown you plt.hist of data1, and then I have shown the plt hist of data2, and I've made the color as red, and I have also given the color of the second data as blue, and I also have specified the transparency level of these colors as 0.5 and 0.5, and I have taken the number of bins as 20. Just for your understanding, I have given it as 20. And you can see it is plotting both the things with the transparency level. So you cannot see exactly red and you cannot see exactly blue over here. So you can have more number of data. You can also plot more number of data into a single plot like. And now we will see what is a scatter plot. So scatter plot is a diagram where each value in the data set is represented by a dot. So you wanted to have some data over here. So I am going to take a data X and Y. So where X, I am considering this as the register number of the students. So I have taken 18 students and their corresponding marks. So I wanted to plot these two values. So what is the plot I am going to use? It is a scatter plot. So it is scatter followed by X comma Y. So if you wanted to give a title, you can use set underscore title. If you wanted to give X label, if you wanted to specify Y label, you can use the set underscore X label, set underscore Y label, and you can specify whatever values you wanted to specify over here. So you can see the scatter plot. There are 18 dots inside. What is the title? It is a score record. And what is the X values? It is register number. And what is the Y values? It is your marks. So this is the way you are going to plot the scatter plot for the given data. So now we will go for the bar chart. A bar chart or bar graph is a chart that presents categorical data with rectangular bars with heights or lengths proportional to the values that they represent. So here also I am taking the same values what I have taken for the scatter plot, X values as well as the Y values, and I am going to use a function bar for plotting these two values. So look at this one, AX dot bar followed by X comma Y, and I have taken the same value, similar values as your title, X label as well as your Y label. You can see the bar chart. So here it is a vertical. You can also have some horizontal bar charts also. Until now I have shown you the basic chart functions that we are using Matplotlib. And now I will show you some of the other data visualization that can be done using a Seaborn library. So Seaborn is a library, and it is a wonderful library where you can make some statistical graphical analysis in Python, and it is built on the top of Matplotlib, and it is closely integrated with Pandas data structures. And when you're dealing with a set of data, often the first thing you will always is you have to sense how the variables are distributed, how it is being distributed, and you can draw plot for multiple variables as well as bivariate also. You can draw plots for two variables with bivariate, or you can have some univariate graphs also. I'll give you few examples of bivariate as well as your univariate graphs. So first one you see, it is a joint plot, it is a bivariate plot. So Seaborn is helping you to analyze the distribution between two data. It is a bivariate graph. So I have, so look at the examples, I have taken two values. One is data 1, another one is your data 2. Now I can have a joint plot which will give you the analysis between this data 1 and data 2. So you can see the bivariate graph which has been represented using a joint plot based on the library Seaborn. And now for a single variable, univariable, the first plot I am going to show you is a rug plot. So this rug plot will just give a small tick wherever it finds an observation. Or otherwise, whenever you have a value, it will have a small tick. Whenever it finds one, it will make a tick. Whenever it finds a second one, but there also it makes a small tick. So how is this particular plot created? Take a data. I have created a data where I've got 25 values, and this is Seaborn, SNS, Seaborn, SNS followed by rug plot, followed by the data. What is this data? The random values which I have earlier created, and I have taken the y limit between 0 to 1. Look at the plot over here. I have taken the y limit as 0 to 1, and my random values here, wherever it finds the values, it makes a tick. That is what it is giving you, a small line. So whenever you don't find the values, there is no tick. So it is not showing a value over there. So this is your rug plot, which is a univariate data analysis. And in this rug plot, you can have histogram placed over that. So how is that? The histogram sets up 10 bits, and how it does is it just counts on how many ticks appeared in that bin, and based on that it will set the height of each bar. And if look at this one, plot hist for the data, and the transparency I have taken it as 0.03 is the alpha value, and SNS.rug plot. So you will have both rug plot as well as the histogram in that particular graph. So look at here. So I have given the rug plot has been taken. For the same rug plot, this histogram bars are also being specified just by counting the number of ticks that is available in that particular value. And same example, one more example I'll give you with respect to univariate distribution is your dist plot. So dist plot is another plot where it will give you the distribution using your kernel density estimation. So it will have it will draw the histogram, and it will fit the kernel above that. So for an example, I'll take here, I look at this one. I've taken a data set is equal to random number of 100 random numbers, and I've taken the dist plot where it is going to plot the data set. Here I have taken the bin size is 25, right? If you're not specifying the bin size, it will by default, it will take it as 10. So here you can see the histogram followed by your kernel. And the kernel density estimate is useful for plotting the shape of the distribution. And like the histogram, the KDE plot will encode the density of the observation on an axis with height along with the other axis. So you can have histogram, rug, as well as this KDE, all those in a single plot. Look at this one, dist plot. It is taking the value for data set. Rug is equal to true. So you can see the rug values here. And the histogram is equal to false. So you are not seeing the histogram. So dist plot actually distributes your kernel. So you can see the line over here, right? And if you wanted to specify as this is your rug plot and this is your kernel, you can write like this. You look at here, it takes dist plot, you're specifying color is equal to Indian red, label is KDE plot, and similarly for the other one, color is equal to blue, label is equal to histogram. So here if you see KDE plot is in red color and histogram plot is in the blue color. So as of now I have shown you different functions using which you can have different kinds of plots. You can have histogram. I showed about histogram. We've seen about scatter plot. You have seen about bar chart. And with Seaborn library, I have shown you bivariate as well as your univariate. For bivariate, you go for joint plot, and for univariate, you go for dist plot. And similarly, you can go with histogram also over here. And here I have shown you how rug plot is also been shown. So I think you have understood clearly. So I think this session has taken you through a good understanding about how the basic Python programming works for data. Along with that, the data visualization part is also clear for you. Thank you.